A warmer from the low. Welcome to lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. We've got an excellent podcast for you as we're going to be joined in a few minutes by Sam Federman. He does an absolutely tremendous job over at Mid-Major Madness, taking a look at this great game that we all know and love of college basketball. We're going to be chatting with him about just what this landscape has done in terms of a conference that's near and dear to him in the Metro Atlantic. So we're going to chat with him a little bit about that conference in particular, but really how this landscape has changed things for a lot of these mid-majors is what we saw this past season in college basketball with the 4-1 seeds being able to make the Final Four a little bit of a one-off. Is this a little bit more of a sign of things to come? We're going to be diving in on that front as well, and we're also going to be talking about the Iona coaching change that we saw over the offseason as well. So we've got a lot to dive in on there. And then in the final segment, I'm going to give you guys a roundup of all the news and notes that we saw in college basketball over the last 24 hours. If you do have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you have one of two ways we offer those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at gunit_D1. Keep in mind, letters CM, they mean does not matter. So as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. And the other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. And as per usual, I will be leaving this first segment open for questions and comments. I've been doing a lot of 2-segment shows just because there's no games from the previous day to recap or anything like that. So please do just let me know what you want to hear on this podcast. And I just don't want to draw a podcast giving you ramble about stuff that you're not concerned about and frankly might not be of impact when it comes to being able to make money during the college basketball season. That's what we're all about here. That's why you're going to notice the next few weeks, the recaps are going to be very, very long because we've got 100 million billion guys that are deciding where they're going to go to in the transfer portal. We saw much more of that on Friday, so just be mindful of that. And how about if we do dive in with our good friend? We do have one of the harder working guys that you're going to find in all of college basketball, Sam Federman. He does a tremendous job over at Mid-Major Madness, chronicling all that we see. He does a tremendous job with the Metro Atlantic, but additionally, if it's Northeast Hoops, this guy is very much locked and loaded. He did a great job covering the Final Four just a few short weeks ago. You're able to follow him on Twitter/X at his first and last name, Sam Federman. That is Sam and underscore, and then the last name of Federman. And Sam, great to get you aboard. Thank you.
Thanks for having me on. The worst 7 months of the year, the off season. It's probably the most hectic month of the year in terms of basketball news, because there's just going to be something coming out every 3 seconds, and it feels like you got to be on your toes at all times with the portal.
Oh, it certainly is. And being a podcast that tries to cover this every single day, it's, I would say, a defeatist effort. And I don't know how you view this, but this is the approach I've taken this year. I think that it's news when someone is not in the transfer portal, and it's news when someone comes back rather than someone being in, because if I'm playing the numbers right now as a hit refresh on verbal commits, because they do a good job of tracking all these transfers, there's 2,253 guys in the portal, and if my math is correct, that means that there's fewer guys that have not entered the portal than there is guys that have entered the portal itself in terms of just the guys that are able to come back for next year.
Yeah, the way I look at it is, if you're at a mid-major program and you enter if you're good and at a mid-major program, I'm expecting you to enter the portal, basically. I'm operating under the assumption that you're probably going to enter the portal. If you're at a high major program, I'm probably less likely to assume that, although certain high major programs, I will assume that certain players will enter the portal. Also, guys that maybe don't play a ton and there's not a ton of a pathway, I could also see those guys entering the portal. But the news is more when somebody commits versus when somebody enters the portal.
Yep, and a total agreement with you there. That's the approach I've taken this offseason, and until I see otherwise, I have no reason to think otherwise. And in terms of what we've all been seeing in the Metro Atlantic this offseason, how do you think they are going to be playing things in terms of portal? Because when it comes to the Metro Atlantic, I think that we both agree this has been one of the conferences that has been hurt the most by it, because I do feel like there's been a lot of lost talent. There's been a lot of just teams in general that have had a little bit of a tough time adapting to things. And I think that this is a critical offseason for the Metro Atlantic to try to be able to get back to a little bit more of the prominence that they had prior to NIL becoming just so supreme in college basketball.
I don't look at this offseason any different than I looked at last offseason or the offseason before that at this point. I wrote this in my preview for the 23-24 season. It was like my lead for the preview. It was like the only constant is that everything's changing. Like every year feels like a new era, but at what point does that just become the new era? I think we're at that point where we're all in one era right now, where every year everything's going to change. and we have to assume that everything's going to change every single year. Obviously, we had a couple more coaching changes in past years than we did this year in the MAAC, but I'm kind of numb to the players leaving at this point. I expect it. There are certain teams that I've come to expect players hitting the portal out of the MAAC these days.
Yep, I have as well with really any conference in general. Like, even these guys are averaging double digits when it comes to being out there in the SEC. Some of these guys are looking for a new home as well. So I'm in agreement with you there. And it is very much a changing landscape in college basketball, in which I think that we both agree. This last year, it was very top heavy. But do you think what we saw this past year in college basketball was a little bit more of a one-off? And I'm not talking in terms of one-off, in terms of just like, oh, the SEC is going to get a lot of bids in the NCAA tournament. I think that that's here to stay. But I'm talking about just like four teams being so dominant compared to the rest of all of college basketball, because I do think that we are going to see more of those like teams 10 through 20 be a little bit more, shall we say, close and a little bit more competitive than we saw this past season in college basketball.
Here's the thing. I think teams 10 through 20 this year were awesome. It's just that teams 1 through 4 were that good. I think I remember this. In 2024, there were 17 teams with a KenPom rating over 20. This year, there were 33. I think a big reason why we saw that happen is because, especially over the last couple of years, we've had really, really good teams because we've had some really, really good fifth and sixth year seniors. And also last season, we had a tremendous freshman class. I think this upcoming season is also a good freshman class. 2024 was less of that, but I think you look into, we're not going to have quite as many fifth and sixth year guys in college basketball going forward. There are a lot of players that think they can get a fifth and sixth year. There are probably a lot of players that will be getting a fifth year, but there are not close to as many as there have been the past couple of years. And I think that that's going to make overall the quality of the sport a little bit worse. Although the proliferation of international talent that is open pathways by NIL, the fact that playing in the United States is now going to get these guys more money and more of a NBA draft platform than playing overseas, I think that's going to benefit the sport, because you're going to get kids that would never have come to play college basketball coming to play college basketball. I think as a whole, we're trending in that direction. I don't think we've gotten as far in that direction as we were with the fifth and sixth year players. I mean, yeah, a lot of the best teams had some players that were there for a very long time. Obviously, Houston had Jawan Roberts, who was a sixth year senior, and Pryor was a fifth year senior. And those were probably their two best players throughout the season. Obviously, Uzan is tremendous as well. Tugler too, but those two guys were probably their rocks throughout the year. Sharp, obviously awesome. That was a great team, but those two guys were two of the biggest keys. And then you get the guys that break out in their fourth year and then transfer up for a fifth year. Those are your Chaz Lanier types. You're not going to get as many of those. I will say the JUCO year will still be a big deal. There's a lot of athletes that think they're getting a JUCO year that aren't, or think they're getting an extra year that aren't, but there are plenty that will be getting a JUCO year. And the one thing is, I am a little bit concerned about how the NCAA is going to deal with this. I hope that they don't end up getting smacked in court again, because that is how like we get to the point where the NCAA can't enforce anything. It's them getting kicked around in court and want the best for all the players. But you get to a point where the NCAA is so far away from being able to enforce anything because they keep losing in court. We're obviously trending in a direction with the House settlement coming, and where we are heading more towards a professional model. Maybe we'll have some opportunities to change the way this goes down, but I think there's a chance that, I mean, look, I have no idea. I don't think we're going to have four teams as dominant as these four. I think we're going to have a lot of good teams. I think there's a lot of teams out there that have good coaches and have a lot of money and therefore are going to be very good. And I think that there's a lot of teams out there that have good coaches and maybe don't have as much money and they're going to be scrappy. And there's teams out there that have a lot of money and not great coaches, and they're going to pull out some wins because of how talented they are. But I think overall, this year was an outlier in terms of how good the top of the sport was, because of the fifth year guys and a lot of teams that maybe the bell curve was a little more skewed towards the top in NIL money. There's a lot more teams that have more money now. And yes, the teams at the top have even more, but there's a lot more teams with a lot more money now. The budgets that were middle of the pack in high major conferences are now middle of the pack in the A10 or whatever. You're going to see a lot of good teams. I don't know if you're going to see any teams as good as the top four this year. I think that's more just it's hard to be as good as Auburn was this year. And Auburn was the fourth best team this year.
Yeah, it's just absolutely insane what we saw from those top four teams. And I'm right there with you. I think that we're going to see a little bit more madness in terms of upsets in the next NCAA tournament. And I do feel like this was just very much a one-off. As joining me, we've got Sam Federman. He does such amazing work over at Mid-Major Madness, joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops. And then additionally, with regards to the coaching moves that we've seen this offseason, certainly the Metro Atlantic have experienced a few of them. It was quite a bit of a surprise to me as to what happened with Mr. Tobin Anderson, but how do you take a look at the landscape of that for both mid-major schools and the Metro Atlantic in general? Because I thought that it was quite surprising, as I mentioned with Iona, and I think that is going to be very intriguing to see what happens with regards to these schools that both decide to stick it out and a team like a Canisius, for example, that is looking to turn over a new leaf themselves.
Yeah, we're now at the point where the only teams in the MAAC, since I started covering the league, I started covering the league in 21-22, are Rider, Niagara, Marist. And then obviously Merrimack and Sacred Heart have not had coaching changes, but they have not been in the MAAC for that entire time period. And now Iona's had 2 coaching changes in my time covering the conference. So a lot of coaching turnover in college basketball. The MAAC this year did not have as much, only 1 coaching change, and I was very surprised by it. I think there's a good chance Dan Giroux does a good job at Iona. I think he's going to be held under a lot of pressure because the fact of the matter is when you fire a guy after 2 years that basically everyone in the sport agrees is a really good basketball coach. If you're not far exceeding what you were getting out of the previous coach at that point, what's going to stop them from doing the whole rodeo again? But I think Dan Giroux is going to be well funded in his efforts to win MAAC championships, and I think Tobin would have been well funded as well, and he was well on his way to winning MAAC championships at Iona. He came very, very close this year, but you can't dwell on it if you're a MAAC fan, if you're someone who covers the conference. It sucks for Tobin, but he's caught on now at South Florida with Brian Hodgson. He gets some better weather. I think he'll be a head coach again somewhere. And you got to focus now, from the MAAC's sake, on what will Dan Giroux bring to Iona. I don't know exactly. I want to develop talent. He played for Richmond. He did the Princeton style of offense, and then he went to the NBA, and he got experience in a lot of other pro style concepts. So I wonder how you're going to see the blend of everything that he's learned over his basketball career. I'm very fascinated to see the way that he plays as a head coach. I don't think that there's anything really that is a major indicator of that at the moment. He's brought in a bunch of size right now, some bigger wings. We're still waiting on more additions from them. They've brought in 3 transfers. They've lost a lot more than 3. We'll see what happens with Iona. And overall, this was not as busy of a coaching carousel as last year. There were, I think, 10 or so more moves last year. There still could be some, potentially. You do get late moves. I don't really have one general takeaway from the coaching carousel. I think there are a lot more schools going down the route of NBA experience, especially with Utah and with Florida State. I think Radford did as well. Then there were some late changes in some places, and left some schools kind of scrambling, and there were a lot of good moves. There were a lot of moves that we probably think are really good that won't work out. There are a lot of moves that we're probably not talking a ton about that will work out. That's just what the coaching carousel is these days, and we'll have to see.
Yep, it certainly is going to be a wait and see sort of scenario there. And we have been noticing some of these teams that have pulled from the NBA an assistant and brought them into their university. Looking at UBYU, it's working out really well for them. And what always works out really well for us is having you aboard, Sam. You do such a great job all 12 months out of the year, taking a look at this great game that we all know and love of college basketball. You're one of the hardest workers out there. So let the good people at home know what's on tap for you and how people can follow along on social media and other platforms.
Yeah, Sam_Federman on Twitter, at bracketsbubblesandbidstealers.com for the podcast, writing for Mid-Major Madness. Got with Noon's Magician, the Syracuse SB Nation site as well, working on some scouting reports on the guys Syracuse is getting in the transfer portal and freshmen as well. I'll have more of those over the next few weeks. I'll have some more stuff on the AAU circuit as well this summer. That's something that I'm really looking forward to. But things don't necessarily slow down in my brain right now. I'm still going 150 miles an hour in my head. I'm always thinking ball.
Yes, he always is. Sam is doing such a great job taking a look at all that we're getting here in the offseason because he realizes, much like myself, the teams that we're going to be seeing in March, the teams that are going to be competing for titles, they're building up their championship rosters at this time right now. So big thanks to Sam for joining me on Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. And coming next, let's recap all the news and notes we saw in college basketball over the last 24 hours. And we're back here in lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. Always great to be able to get Sam Federman aboard, who does such great work over at Mid-Major Madness. Taking a look at this great game that we all know of college basketball. Every single time he joins me, lends such great insights. Did so once again today. So a big thanks to our good friend Sam for joining me in the last segment. Now it is that time of the podcast. I give you a recap of the news and notes that we saw in college basketball over the last 24 hours. How about a good get for Arkansas State, as Ryan Pannone is going to be adding Chandler Jackson to the fold. He was a starter for Florida State this past season. Now, he wasn't going out there and putting up like monster numbers or anything like that for Jackson. 6.5 points, 2 assists, a little bit over a steal per contest, but I mean, being able to have this sort of an ad for a Sunbelt team, and he was a former top 1 recruit as well. This is very big. Now, the biggest thing with Chandler Jackson is that he's a career 27% three-point shooter that shot less than 16% from three-point range this season, so he is not going to be giving you a ton from the outside or anything like that, but I think that he's going to do a really good job with this Arkansas State team, and he's going to fit a lot of the mold of what Arkansas State had 8 seasons ago, back when they were under the tutelage of the old coaching regime with having Mike Hodgson heading on over to South Florida, and Pannone, he's a guy that was a little bit more on the inside, so they're going to be looking to keep a lot of consistency there, and I do think that this sort of an ad that is going to be able to help to do so. You saw Josiah Mosley, a former top 100 recruit that had a tough time getting out there for Villanova this past season. He gave the team 2 points, 2.3 rebounds per game. At 6'6", not really a guy that's going to go out there, shoot it from three-point range or anything like that. He's a little bit more of a back-to-the-basket, low-post sort of player. He's going to be going on over to Texas Tech. Now, he played his high school basketball out there in the state of Texas, so I think that that's going to be helpful for them. Now, for Texas Tech, they could probably use him to be a little bit more versatile. If not, he's probably going to be nothing more than a depth piece for the team, but still, I think that he's going to be a relatively solid pickup, and that is one that I do like what they're able to bring to the table. You've got Jackson Olivera, who is over at Pepperdine. He has decided that he is going to be going to Louisiana. Louisiana doing a relatively solid job of being able to hit the transfer portal, and for Olivera, he averaged about 6 points per contest last season, but that said, this is a guy that was able to show really his worth towards the back half of the season. He's someone that at 6'5", as a true freshman, just got better and better as the season went along, shot about 33% from three-point range, but I do think that with him being just year number 1 last season, and in the final 27 games of the season, he was averaging more like 6.5 points per contest. I do think that he's going to be able to give you a little bit of upside. I would like him to be a bit of a better rebounder. He didn't give you too much on the glass at 6'5". He could use a little bit more there, but I do think that this is going to be a solid ad for a Louisiana team that they're just really looking to pick up the pieces from a season ago. Ezra Usar, he was over at Utah last season. He has decided that he's going to another former Pac-12 school. He's going to be going to USC. Rock solid last year, 12.5 points, 5 rebounds per contest. He began his career over at East Carolina, made the jump from East Carolina up to the Power Conference level over at Utah. Pretty solid, 6'8", not a guy that's really going to give you like a lot of three-point shooting or anything like that, but he's a guy that's able to run the floor. Utah was a little bit more of an up-tempo team. With USC, they were just not great in the post last season in general. I do look for them being able to do a little bit more there, so I think that that's relatively solid. And for Louisiana as well, they brought in another guy from the West Coast, Todd Jones. He was averaging about 3 points per contest this past season when he was over at Portland, so it's not a guy that I think is necessarily going to be amazing for this team, but you know what, Louisiana starting to be able to field a little bit more of a roster, and last year Louisiana had absolutely no depth whatsoever, so being able to just add a few guys like this, I think is going to be solid for them moving forward. I think that this is a solid add as well for Memphis. They're going to be bringing in Sincere Parker. He was essentially the sixth man last season for McNeese, 12 points, 2.5 rebounds per game. Not an amazing three-point shooter, but if you go back to his time when he was at St. Louis, he was a little bit more of a primary ball handler, and he was averaging 16 points per contest there, so I think that he's going to be able to do a really good job in this Memphis system, that they just lost PJ Haggerty to the transfer portal, so they are very much looking for those go-to scorers sort of guys, and I do think that he's going to be able to do so. With Parker, again, he's going to need to work on that three-point shot just a little bit, as Memphis, they were one of the best three-point shooting teams in all of college basketball last season, but I've noticed that a lot of guys have gone into the program have become very good three-point shooters, albeit it's come at the cost of a lot of turnovers, so that's something that you do have to have some few question marks with. That said, he's going to be adding some good needed depth to a team that already has Zachary Davis coming in from South Carolina. Ashton Hardaway is coming back for a second time after he was over at St. Mary's last season. Julius Redford is a little bit of a do-it-all guy that doesn't necessarily pop it from three for Western Kentucky, so I do think that with Memphis needing to add a little bit more three-point shooting, it's going to be big, but I do like the way that they're starting to fill out this roster. And then you've got Darrell Simmons. He was over at Gardner-Webb this last season. He's going to be playing at St. Bonaventure, so he's going to be playing 40 minutes this year after he averaged 17 points, 3 boards, and a steal per contest, shot 39% from three. Rock solid player. Again, with St. Bonaventure, they have yet to bring in a lot of guys in the transfer portal. They pretty much had 5 guys do a little bit of everything, and I know that at least 3 of them have hit the transfer portal. If not, I think that they're probably going to be losing all 5 guys that played like 40 minutes a game from a season ago. So St. Bonaventure, they better be hitting the transfer portal hard, as they're also bringing in Braden Jackson. That's a guy that I think is going to be a non-factor. Frank Mitchell, who comes over from Minnesota, he's another candidate to be playing 40 minutes, but that's the problem with the Dr. Schmidt system. Dr. Schmidt, really good coach, does a nice job with the X's and O's, completely runs his guys into the ground. So if there could be a little bit more depth here, Darrell Simmons, I think, has a chance to be great for St. Bonaventure. Once again, just need to find someone that's able to give you a few minutes off the bench, like anyone. Like literally anyone, a body, throw out there a scarecrow, something to be able to give someone just like a 5-minute blow during a game, so that way they're able to be effective towards the back half of it. Juan Cranford Jr., he was the Rookie of the Year out there in the NEC. He was a part of the St. Francis of Pennsylvania team that unfortunately is going down to the Division III level. He's decided that he's going to be going to Eastern Kentucky. Eastern Kentucky is an up-tempo team that they like to have guys that are able to generate turnovers, and Cranford's team in St. Francis wasn't necessarily like a heat-seeking missile with regards to generating turnovers, but he's got a pretty good defensive game. 10 points, 2 assists, steal per contest. He's a 40% three-point shooter. He's going to be able to fit the system very well, as Eastern Kentucky does like guys that are able to pop it and lock it from three-point range. So I do think that that is a pretty good pickup for them, and I think that this is also a pretty solid pickup, as well as you've got Rob Brown III coming on over from Nichols to Stony Brook. For Stony Brook, they just really lacked any sort of scoring whatsoever. They were one of the least efficient offenses in all of college basketball. Bringing in a guy in Rob Brown that was able to shoot 36% from three, logged for the team 13 points, 3.5 boards, is able to give you a little bit on the defensive side of things as well in terms of generating steals. I think that this is a really good pickup for them, so I love what I'm seeing there. I do like this one as well. You've got a guy in Wilson Dubinsky. He was over at South Carolina State this last season. He was a rock-solid rotational piece, shot 45% from three, 8 points, 3 boards per contest. He has decided that he is going to be going to Marshall. Marshall was a hit or miss 3-point shooting team last season for South Carolina State. This was actually one of the more efficient defensive teams in all of college basketball last season as well. He's a very nice, well-rounded player. I think that he's going to be able to have great success in this position, so I do think that that is going to be solid for Marshall. We'll see what else they're going to be doing moving forward, as they've been a little bit slow moving forward here in the transfer portal, but this is a nice move to be able to make. Nate Bradford, he has decided that he is going to be going to Charleston Southern. For Charleston Southern to be able to get an ad like this, I think is pretty solid. He was a starter for much of the season for Georgia Southern. He actually shot 40% from three-point range at 6'9". Now, he only gave the team about 3.5 points, 2.5 rebounds per game, but Charleston Southern has really been lacking size over the last few seasons. Being able to bring in a guy like this, I think, is going to be able to help them out. And for Charleston Southern, they, along with a lot of other Big South schools, have been just adding a little bit more in terms of the NIL fund. They've been able to do a better job of being able to add in the transfer portal. And I'm not saying that the Big South is all of a sudden becoming some sort of massive powerhouse in terms of college basketball, but also bringing in Devin Bradford, who was over at Siena, 6'10" big man. They're really doing a nice job of being able to address some of the issues that they've had over the last few seasons. So I do like that. Aaron Banks, he was over at Georgia Southern this last season as well. He has decided that he is going to be going to Appalachian State. He was able to average a steal and a half, 9.5 points per contest, and shot 40% from three-point range. This is exactly what Appalachian State needs. He's able to be rock solid on the defensive side of things. He's able to give them some three-point shooting. Hopefully he shoots a little bit better at the free throw line as well, because man, Appalachian State, last few seasons, they have been dreadful at the free throw line, which I find to be very intriguing, because with Appalachian State, I really do think that they've got one of the best coaching staffs in all of college basketball, because Appalachian State, school that was able to win like 25 games 2 seasons ago, Dustin Kearns, I remember he was able to take Presbyterian, the Blue Hose, to a 21 season, which that's not easy to say the least, but I mean, his teams are, for some reason, always really bad at the free throw line, and Aaron Banks, by the way, shot 61.4% 64% at the free throw line last season, actually 61.7% at the free throw line. So I do find that to be a little bit hilarious that they add another, shall we say, not so great free throw shooter into the fold, but still, I do think that that's something that's going to be able to help them out moving forward. Luke Hunger, he is going to be going on over to George Washington. Last year, he was over at Northwestern. Saw some solid minutes towards the back half of the season, about 3 points, 2.5 rebounds per game. For George Washington, they put such a big emphasis on the defensive side of things towards the back half of last season, and I do think that this is going to be another nice move for them as they do add a little bit more size, so they're going to be better on the glass. They were getting killed in terms of some of the second and third chance opportunities, and he was one of the more highly touted prospects in the country of Canada a few seasons ago as well. So I do think that this is going to be a solid add for George Washington. The biggest thing for them being able to add just a little bit more in terms of that backcourt. You saw when Garrett Johnson went down prior to the start of the season, that really did hurt them quite a bit for the entirety of the season, and now they've got Trey Dinkins coming in as well. So those are two solid adds. Would like to see them be able to add a little bit more depth, but so far so good for them. Adam Nanji, who was over at Iona this last season, was playing better towards the back half of the season. As a true freshman, he had to run the point for Iona, 12.5 points, 4 assists per contest. Did have a few too many turnovers. He was turning the ball over about 3 times per contest, but was able to generate 1.7 steals per contest as well. He comes into Dayton with Dayton losing Malachi Smith. They needed a replacement out there in the backcourt. I think that he's going to be able to be a nice developmental guy. I think that he could be solid this year with Dayton, but I really see that like season number 3 for him, which would be season number 2 over at Dayton and moving forward as being those prime years for them. They've already got Jordan Durcock along to Sean Montgomery coming on over as well. So Dayton has done a great job of being able to hit the backcourt. Probably going to need a little bit more rebounding, but so far so good. Augustinus Kadulis, he's going to be going on over to Colorado State. He was at VMI this last season at 6'8", was able to average 15 points, 6.5 boards, right around about a steal per contest, and I think that his versatility is going to be really good in this Ali Farouk-Benesh sort of system for Kadulis. He was a part of a VMI team that I felt like they played above their skis about as well as anyone in college basketball. For Kadulis, only about a 30% three-point shooter, but was able to get to the free throw line often, was able to shoot about 81% when he did get to the free throw line. Just a really good guy that was able to make things happen, I think is the best way I'll be able to put it. So I do like what he's able to bring to the table, and I mentioned this just in passing with Charleston Southern, but Bradford, who's going over from Siena, a little bit over a block per contest at 7'1". He adds quite a bit more size to them as well, so I do like that for them. And for Colorado State, I also like this one, Jevin Munoz, who was over this last season at Florida Gulf Coast, 10.5 points, 5 boards, a little bit over 4 assists per game. He's a guy with a little bit of size that's able to be sort of like a point forward at 6'6". He's a guy that's able to shoot it okay from 3-point range. I'm not going to call him an amazing 3-point shooter, but this last year shot about 32.8% from 3-point range. Once again, good versatility for Colorado State. If they're looking to play positionless basketball, have a lot of size around the wing, I think that they're going to be able to do a good job of that. So I like what he's able to bring to the table there. Nate Calmezzi, he was over at Washington State this last season. He was able to be a relatively rock-solid guy with 15 points, 4.5 assists per game. He was over at Lamar a few seasons ago as well after being one of the top junior college transfers in all of college basketball. He's heading on over to Wake Forest, and this is exactly what Wake Forest needed. With Wake Forest last season, you could tell that the loss of Kevin Miller just absolutely took it out of this program. They had absolutely nobody that was able to run the point for this team, and as a result, you saw so many guys that were very effective with their offensive numbers a season ago just completely fall off the table. They really need a little bit of, shall we say, direction and facilitation. Now, with Calmezzi, he did have like 3 turnovers per game. It was a Washington State team that was one of the lesser effective teams in terms of being able to take care of the ball in all of college basketball, so they're going to need to work on that with them. But for Wake Forest, they've done a nice job being able to address some needs here in the offseason. Cooper Schwieger should be able to give them some rebounding. Miles Colvin, Makai Mason, these are guys that are able to be relatively stretchable, 6'5" guys that are able to give you a little bit of 3-point shooting, so I do like what they're able to bring to the table. You got Jason Ismoda, hopefully I said that correctly. He is going to be adding on over to Boston College after at Baylor this last season. He just didn't see a lot of playing time in general at 6'8". He gave the team a point and a half, a rebound and a half per contest, just was never really able to pop. He was sort of left in the abyss with all the depth that they had, and for Boston College, they just need anything to go right, as this is a top 100 recruit that was in the class of, I believe, 2024 that is going to be coming in, and for Boston College, they've been really lacking. pretty much anything at all. The last 2 seasons, they've ran through one man. Quentin Post was very good in the post for them 2 seasons ago. Last year, they were able to get some good production out of Donald Hand, and absolutely nobody else was giving them much of anything. So being able to get a pickup like this, I do think that that is going to be able to help them out a little bit more moving forward. Abdul Momoa, he was a very good defensive player over at Central Connecticut State. He was able to chip in there a block and a half, 8.5 points, 6 rebounds per contest. Not a guy that's going to go out there popping and lock it from 3-point range, but he's going to be going to UIC, the Illinois Flames. And for the Flames, they really improved their defense towards the second half of the season. This is a bunch as under the tutelage of Rob Asana. And Asana, I always felt like got a little bit of a raw deal when he was over at UAB. He's done a good job here with UIC, and they've done a nice job of really being able to beef up the defense. They bring in Sam Silverstein, who comes over from Cal Baptist. I don't think that he's going to do a ton with them, but Mekhi Lowry is another one of those 6'6" guys that was over at Towson, one of the most rough and tumble mid-major defenses in all of college basketball. It is very clear that they are looking to really address the defensive side of things, and I think that they have done a good job thus far with that, so that is something that I do like to see. And then you've got Jaqualin Roberts. He was over at Vanderbilt this last season, just was unable to get out there on the floor in general. He has decided that he is going to be going on over to Davidson. With Davidson, this is a team that they need to find a little bit more depth in general, and Roberts, I think, could be a relatively nice upside guy, 6'6" combo player that was able to shoot it relatively well from 3-point range. When he was coming out in terms of the recruitment process in 2023, he was a number 9 recruit in the state of Indiana, a top 250 sort of guy, and I do think that he's going to be able to add a little bit of stretchability. It's a Davidson team that is always predicated on good 3-point shooting, and I think that he's going to be able to do a good job of being able to help this team out moving forward. You also saw Trey Fort decide that he is going to be going to Michigan State. Ironically, Sam Iamford did play against Michigan State during the regular season this last year, so they got a nice up-close and personal look at him. For Mr. Fort, he was able to hold down the fort with about 14.5 points, a little bit over in assists per contest. He shot 38% from 3-point range. This is exactly what Michigan State needs, because Michigan State's main kryptonite last season was the fact that he just did not have any sort of 3-point shooting whatsoever. Being able to add a guy like this, I think, is going to be able to help them out. And I mean, Tom Izzo actually hitting the transfer portal. It is very much a welcome sight to see. This is a welcome sight to see as well. Central Florida, they're going to be bringing in Jeremy Fomina for Central Florida when they're really at their peak. They're able to do a nice job of rebounding, as even when they had their guy a few seasons ago in Taco Fall, that allowed them to be at their best. Last year they had Mustafa Team, who he entered in the transfer portal, bringing in Fomina, who only played 9 games this past season. He was rock solid over at Rhode Island. This gives them a little bit more depth. Now, this can't be their end-all be-all down low, because if they're relying upon Fomina to be stepping up down low for the team, a guy that was a few seasons ago averaging 3.5 rebounds per game over at Rhode Island, either A, they're hoping that they have found the greatest fit in the history of college basketball, or B, they need a little bit more. But this is a nice depth piece for them. They've added in a few guards over the last few days, and Jordan Burks from Georgetown, along George Beal from Hampton, who's able to be a nice 3-point shooter. John Bull, the 7'2", sort of do-it-all big man from Ole Miss, he's going to be coming in, and he actually joins one of his teammates, Riley Kugel, in coming in from Central Florida as well. They also added JaMichael Stillwell, so this is looking like a brand spanking new team for Central Florida. I do like what they're doing. The Berg, Will Berg, he was over at Purdue this last season at 7'2", just really couldn't get out there on the floor. He's heading on over to Wichita State. The one thing that Wichita State had good last season was the fact that Quincy Ballard was able to give them some shot blocking. If Berg can sort of be that for Wichita State, that's going to be big. Now with the Paul Mills style, it's very much predicated on 3-point shooting, so either A, he's going to need to reform his system a little bit, because he has not found very good 3-point shooting, and here in the portal thus far, it's not like they've done a great job of being able to bring in 3-point shooters as well, so I am wondering if we're going to see a little bit of a different Wichita State team this season, because the guys that they brought in, Karan Boyd, he's very good on the glass. Dylan Batty, he needs a little bit of versatility. Keenan Giles, I think, is actually a very good 3-point shooter. He should be able to do a nice job running the point, but nobody outside of that is really giving you a lot of 3-point shooting on the roster right now, so it does leave you with some question marks. Maybe they try the pound it down low sort of style. If they do, I think that this is relatively solid for them, but we shall see there. Dante Hulleman, he was a rock solid scorer over at Georgia Southern as well. Georgia Southern guys just all decided that they were going to be committing to schools at the same time. I guess you could call it on Friday. He has decided that he is going to be going on over to Arizona State. He was averaging 16.9 points per contest, shot 39% from 3-point range, and for Arizona State, they had a lot of success finding these mid-major guys last season. season, albeit it is an Arizona State team that when it was all said and done, they did fall a little bit short. But that said, I do think that this is a good pickup for them, very much a much needed one, and I like to see that. AC Bryant, he was over at Alabama A&M this last season, 14 points, 4.5 boards. He shot 41% from three-point range. He's heading on over to Jacksonville State, and Jacksonville State has done a really good job of just being able to find dynamo three-point shooters. We all saw what they were able to do a season ago with bringing in Jaron Pierre, who was one of the best scorers in all of college basketball, and I don't know if he's going to quite be that. That would be very unrealistic, to say the least. But Jacksonville State getting into the game, this is their first guy that they've landed in the transfer portal, so they've got a little bit of work to do. But Ray Harper, I just love the job that he does as a coach. He always gets his team to rebound relatively well. They're always pretty efficient with the ball as well, so I think that this is nice for them. The Drake, they get another pickup. How about Isaiah Karn? I actually do like this pickup for them. True 7-footer. He was averaging a little bit over a block, 6 points per contest. He's able to give you a little bit of three-point shooting. I would say that you don't want to be relying upon this guy to be like some sort of a unicorn three-point shooter or anything like that, but that said, I think that he's going to be able to add quite a bit to this Drake team, and for the Drake, they've done a nice job being able to bring in some guys. Owen Larson, he's coming on over with Eric Henderson from South Dakota State. They bring in Jalen Quinn, who's going to do a nice job at the point guard spot. Deshaun Thomas, who was over at Charlotte this past season, he's able to pop it from three-point range as well, so I mean, so far so good for them. Akur, 2 seasons ago, he was very good at Sam Amford at 6'9". He was shooting about 40% per three, 16 points, 6 boards, over a block and a half per contest. Just did not get out there on the floor for Kansas State. I think that there was both injuries and just him deciding that the program wasn't for him. He has decided that he is going to be heading on over to Mississippi State with this Chris Chan style. I think that it suits him very, very well. He's going to be able to help them generate some turnovers. He's a relatively good defender. He's got good size. He's able to pop it from three, which is something that Mississippi State has very, very much needed. Tremendous pickup from them. I think that this is a great just fit in general for that system for both sides, so do like to see that. Ja'Kai Howard, he was over at Auburn this last season. He has decided that he is going to be going to Utah. He was able to average about 4 points per contest when he was over at Auburn, a 6'6", little bit of a wing guy, and someone that was pretty highly touted coming out of high school as well. Never really found it in terms of being a tremendous three-point shooter, but I do think that he does have that in his bag, and I think that he's going to be able to show that moving forward. A former top 75 recruit of 247 Sports. I think that this is a very nice high upside sort of pickup for them, and I would think that he should be able to flourish over there at Utah. I think that this guy's going to flourish as well. Trey Woodyard, he was over at New Hampshire this last season, was only able to play in 6 games due to injury. During the 2023-24 season, prior to that, he was averaging about 7.5 points, 4 rebounds per game. He's heading on over to Vermont, a guy that at 6'6" is able to guard multiple positions, and it's nice to see Vermont finally jumping into the transfer portal. They have not done a lot of that over the last few seasons, and I felt like they were just passed by, for lack of a better term, with that. So this is a move for Vermont that I think is a good one. I believe that this is the first guy that they picked up in the transfer portal. They're going to need to pick up a few more, but this is a just sort of Vermont sort of trust transfer that they have coming in. I do trust in them being able to get the most out of him. I do think that this is going to be a good fit for them moving forward, and I do think that this is going to be a good fit as well. High Point, another guy is coming in for them. I mean, these guys have some really, really good pockets. It's a former 4-star recruit in Yusuf Singari. He's a 6'10" big man that just was unable to see a lot of action this past season with the likes of Samson Johnson, with Terrace Reed, all those guys down low, Alex Caravan. He was just very much lost in the sauce for them, but he's capable of being a nice shot blocker. I don't think that this is going to be some sort of a big giant impact guy that's going to be like popping in from three-point range. You're not going to be able to get that sort of versatility out of him or anything like that, but him being able to come in, be able to give this team a little bit of production is something that you very much can bank on, and I think that that is going to be able to help them out as well. And then this is a very interesting one as well, is you've got Bryson Tucker going from Indiana on over to Washington, a guy that was able to see action in 23 games this past season, 5.5 points, 3 rebounds per game. A lot of people thought that Bryson Tucker was going to be the bee's knees this season, and he was unfortunately unable to be the bee's knees. If you take a look at 247 Sports and the recruiting rankings that they had for him coming out of high school, they thought that this guy was going to be the real deal, top 35 guy with that regard, and at 6'7", he's got a pretty nice skill set. And for Washington, they've just done such a better job in the transfer portal this offseason, because last offseason they picked up Great Osabor. They picked up Great Osabor, and they picked up Great Osabor. They spent $2 billion on him, and then they left themselves with like 50 cents to fill out the rest of the roster. Now they're doing a great job of being able to spread the wealth. They bring back Wesley Ace, who was a nice double-figure scorer over at USC. Tucker is a nice upside guy. Lathan Somerville was a nice rebounder over at Rutgers. Kamari Peterson, he was able to light it up over at ETSU. Jacob Onyesovic, he was the top scorer out there in the Atlantic Sun this past season at 6'7". He's able to give you some versatility. I like what Washington has right now. It feels like year number 2 is going to be a bust out for Danny Sprinkle after year number 1. Let's call it what it is. It was a pretty big disaster, but you know what? I do think that this is going to be good for them, and I do think that we're going to be seeing them be able to rise up in the Big Ten moving forward. Parsat Falah, he was over at Oregon State this last season, and he put up some nice numbers. 4 boards, 13 points per contest. He was a nice rebounder over at Southern Utah 2 seasons ago as well. He has decided that he is going to be going to Oklahoma State, and this is a big pickup for an Oklahoma State team that was just completely dump trucked on the glass this year. They were one of the worst rebounding teams in all of college basketball, even though they had Abdul Usman, who came on over from North Texas, so that was less than tremendous. Steve Lutz's system just typically doesn't allow for great rebounding in general, so that is a little bit of an issue for them, but bringing in a guy like a Falah, who was really able to show his offensive worth as well, shooting about 60% from the floor, I do like this pickup for Oklahoma State, and they should be a little bit more stout on glass. UMass Lowell's Martin Somerville, he was the rookie of the year out there in the America East. He was lighting it up. He was able to give the team about 13.5 points per contest, shot north of 40% from three-point range. He has decided that he is going to be going to Florida State. Very interesting with Florida State. They're one of the schools that went the professional route in terms of taking a NBA assistant to be their new coach, and for Florida State, they're very much looking to go in a new direction after they just had a whole bunch of size and versatility, and they had a bunch of guys that shot in like the mid-30s from three-point range. They've got a lot of sharpshooters that are coming in. Robert McCray was that top scorer over at Jacksonville this last season. Chauncey Wiggins, he's a guy that's able to be good defensively, but he's able to give you a bit offensively. Kobe McGee is a really good three-point shooter that comes in from Jacksonville. Lachey Jones is something I like as well. I think that Florida State is building themselves a nice roster. They could use a little bit more down low as of right now. We shall see if that's something that they're going to be addressing moving forward, but I do like the moves that they are making, and hopefully you like the moves that this podcast is making right here on Cuz Hoops, part of the VSiN Family Podcast, as I'm looking to get you guys covered every single day in terms of what we are seeing in college basketball. And if you do like hearing from this fine podcast, Cuz Hoops, you're able to subscribe wherever your podcast, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you have one of two ways we offer those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at @GUnit_D1. Keep in mind, letters EM, naming does not matter, so as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. And the other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. And big thanks once again to Sam Federman. Does great work over at Mid Major Madness for joining me in the last segment, and I'm coming at you guys every single day on this podcast, regular season and off season. So I'll be back with you once again tomorrow. Thank you.